Hello, everyone. Welcome to this live stream today on the topic of autism and ADHD. We're joined by a few members of our Patreon community, which is really exciting today. So welcome to anyone who is joining us live, and if you're also watching this on the replay as well. So really excited to get into a bit of a discussion on the differences between autism and ADHD and sharing some personal experience. And yeah, let's get into it. So I have already shared a bit of my thoughts and my experiences in the video that we've just watched. I'm really curious to hear what stood out for you in that.
Oh, I suppose I can go ahead. This topic has always been fascinating to me because as a kid, I actually was diagnosed with ADHD, basically on the basis of fidgeting a lot and forgetting about assignments. I've since come to realize, through your videos and a bunch of other creators and this general focus on what neurodiversity is and how people experience it, that I think I may not be diagnosed ADHD, but you brought up the question of like, how are those labels useful? And ultimately, I'm thinking about like coping mechanisms, strategies for getting by. It's mostly to say that the ADHD ones don't seem to work for me as well as the autism ones, but that's I think it's along your same experience. Like loving routine and structure specifically because it lets you hone in on the stuff that you want to do and reserve your energy for those things.
Thanks, Mark.
I found it really interesting about the emotional dysregulation because I am autistic and ADHD. And when I get overstimulated, I absolutely get emotional. So I thought that was really interesting because I didn't realize that was more prominent in people with ADHD and autism.
Yeah, I have both autism and ADHD. And what resonated with me was when you were talking about attention, especially being able to try to pay attention to things that I don't find interesting. When something is not interesting to me or I'm not feeling it, I can't pay attention. It is almost painful to try to make myself pay attention to something.
Yeah, I really get that painful, like this is the worst thing ever type vibe. And I think that's one of the key differences that I've noticed, because it's very natural to think that everyone else has the same experience as us. That's like a baseline assumption. Like if I find this boring task really painful, then surely everyone does, right? No one likes doing their taxes. Well, almost no one likes doing their taxes. But I think it is one of those things that is quite different for ADHD. I think is what I'm hearing. Because for me, for example, if something's boring, it's a bit of a neutral thing. I'd rather be doing something else, but it's not painful in any way.
Yeah, if I'm bored by something that I know I have to do, then I will do some amount of procrastinating, but it's never running right up until the deadline or relying on that sudden panic that you're describing. It's more of like, well, I have other stuff to do that I care about getting done sooner. No more, no less.
I will absolutely wait until the last minute to do anything. I have pulled so many all-nighters and written so many papers the day before they were due.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I just came out of an accountant's office today, and as I was walking out, I was thinking about, man, there was like 5 or 6 people in there. This is what they do all day, every day. I am so glad that I'm not in that line of work, because I did consider it in college at one point. But my roommate in college used to say that I was on the fireman schedule because I was always cramming the night before for everything I was doing. And the rest of the time I just couldn't get myself to do it. It just was too not interesting enough for whatever else I wanted to pursue at that moment. So I could definitely relate to that.
I actually wanted to ask about, Paul, you said that you'll pre-make choices, right? You'll have just the same thing for breakfast every day, so you don't have to make that choice again every day. And it reduces, it's like one less decision that you have to make every day. So I'll do that, and I'll have the same thing for like lunch every day for like 6 months, and then I will never eat it again. Because, and I feel like that's maybe the ADHD getting bored with it. I don't know. But will you, because I've heard of some autistic people, they'll eat the same thing for lunch every day for years.
My breakfast is still the same 10 years later. It's amazing. Don't get me started on the benefits of my breakfast.
I love having the decision pre-made, but I always hit a point, and it's usually around 6 months, where I'm like, I can never eat this thing again. I'm so sick of it.
And what does it feel like in that 6 months where you have pre-planned it?
It feels great. It's like one less decision I have to make. It feels great. I love it. I love knowing that that's what I'm going to eat. Yeah, it feels great.
Okay. So when you look at the breakfast, you're like, I really love this. This is my favorite.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. I look forward to it. I can't wait. I can't wait to have it. Yep. I've had so many of these like over the course of my lifetime too. Not all healthy, but some.
So this is one of the hardest things for people to understand about ADHD is the hyperfocus element of ADHD, because in popular sort of ways of thinking about it, it's an inattention, it's a lack of attention, whereas one of the core, one key thing of ADHD is that hyperfocus ability. And so if you are really excited about one particular breakfast every day for 6 months, that could potentially be a hyperfocus like that.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm curious go
ahead.
I just have a question for you to answer after your point, which is, I'm curious how that dovetails with your experience of tasting. Like if you feel really strongly about food, or just don't feel strongly about food in general, or
I love food. I love it so much. I think about it all the time. I plan vacations around restaurants. I love food.
Oh, nice.
Awesome. And on the topic of questions, if anyone in the chat would like to ask a question, we have this unique opportunity today being live. We also have the super chat function that should be available as well, if anyone would like to use that. Yeah.
I have a quick story about breakfasts that are the same every day. For the longest time, I had nothing but oatmeal for breakfast every morning, and got to the point where I was just eating the plain oatmeal, like not the packets with the sweetener and stuff. And oatmeal by itself is so plain that I didn't think I would ever just eat just that. But I was noticing that over the course of a few weeks, my taste buds really adjusted so that anything that I ate that was sweet was tasting too sweet. So it kind of had this positive side effect of eating less other fewer sugary, snacks and other things throughout the day. It was just kind of an interesting thing where that routine thing that you do over and over and over can kind of bleed into other areas of your life, depending on what it is that you're choosing.
Yeah, I find it fascinating how relatively extreme sensory things can come in so many different forms. So Like that's almost like an extreme aversion to sugar that you develop by eating reasonably plain food. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I'm not a big sugar fan, but it's more the sense that I can usually put those calories to better use. Not always. Like, there are some fantastic cronuts and cruffins at a local bakery that I get every now and again, but, you know, there's a right amount.
I'm a big salty, crunchy person. I like salty, crunchy things way more than sweet things. Is that I don't know, more common in ADHD? Because I've heard other people with ADHD saying they love salty, crunchy food.
Good question. Let's ask the live listeners. Is liking salty, crunchy things instead of sweet stuff an ADHD thing? Maybe. Could be. I know that a weird thing for me is I like lots of food, and it's a big part of travel. It's a big part of exploring things. But my favorite foods are the ones that I can eat a lot of. So I don't want to just like this tiny little morsel of amazingness. I want to be able to eat a whole bowl of it. So my favorite food is the Indonesian fried rice. So I used to have it every day when I was living in Malaysia, and it was fantastic. So a few people have said yes, love sweet stuff more than crunchy stuff. Salt over sugar, interesting. Crunchy peanut butter. We also have a question. I start projects, but I can always seem to stay with it to finish the project before I'm on to something else. That sounds like a fairly common ADHD thing. How do I stay focused enough to stay to the end? Do any of you have resonate with that experience of multiple projects?
That's one of the terms that we've heard before, like ride the dopamine wave when it's happening. Go as hard as you can if you're able to. As you know, you have to keep your life in balance, but like get as far as you can. But I can definitely relate to that. I have so many projects that I've started. I've had a few that I kept going over time, but it does really have to be something that you're in love with to really take it really far. If you're struggling with ADHD, it's just kind of my experience of it.
I wonder if it's something you could like find a way to make new again, like depending on what the hobby is. If you could find a way to like engage that interest again in a different way, right? Like, I don't know. There's also something called like motivation bridge, which is when you like have a bridge and you have to get across it, but there's a really big gap in the bridge and you can't just jump across the gap in the bridge. You don't want to do the hardest thing first. You want to start with smaller, easier tasks. And then when you complete a small, easy task, it gives you a hit of dopamine. And then you can use that dopamine to do the next slightly larger task. I wonder if you could give yourself some dopamine with something that's shorter and easier and feels good. And then that would help you have the motivation to get back into that task you maybe don't want to finish it now. Work your way up to it.
Yeah. One thing I want to add as, again, possibly not ADHD, but a point that stuck with me and that I'm glad you referenced at the end of the video is that it's less important what labels precisely and more like figuring out what works for you. I've found that I have very little in the way of intrinsic motivation. My office was a mess for the better part of a year until I signed up to chat here for a little bit and realized, oh, I should handle that. So it's suddenly at the top of my priority list. And that sort of thing I found like, I don't love the feeling of relying on having people tell me what to do. But honestly, it's been a huge help for me just to have a friend that nudges me and says, hey, you should do this thing, Or, what if we got together on this date and worked on what have you? I understand the shame that comes with feeling like you can't do these things on your own, but if there's a mechanism like that you can use, it is way more valuable to get practice doing the thing than feel bad about not doing it right.
Yeah, this is one of the things that I have the most trouble understanding because my brain works so differently. Like, I am just so used to deciding what to do and then doing it. And the motivation factor, it's like it's not even a factor for me. Like, if the motivation is I've decided to do it, so I have to do it because of reasons for my decision. So if once there's enough in a line that my brain is on board and thinks it's a good idea, well, then I have to do it. It doesn't matter if I want to do it or not, because it's a good idea. So I think recognizing what does motivate you is really, really powerful. I've realized that I'm motivated by a finish line. There's a really boring task that I don't want to do, but if there's a finish line where I know I don't have to do it anymore, then that's really motivating. Which probably sounds really strange to anyone motivated by actually emotions and feeling like they want to do it.
I think that you can definitely like train your brain to like get dopamine from finishing something or from being successful at something, right? So yeah, I think it's valid.
One of the concepts I've embraced, because I work with software engineering, and so there's this concept of MVP, like a minimal viable product, and I've tried to apply that to different projects or different areas of my life, as in like, what is the bare minimum that I would need to do to feel like this task is completed. And as I'm doing that normally, and I think this is probably an ADHD thing, I will come up with tons of different ideas, lots of things that I want to do. Just as I'm doing it, I will have like 10 other ideas of different things that I want to do. And I just kind of like write those down. And then I can kind of pick through them and use that to sort of chase the dopamine. But I find that, sort of my sweet spot is getting to about 70 or 80% completion. I actually really don't like the feeling of finishing a project all the way when I've gotten really into it. If it's something that I'm just forcing myself to do, then that's different. But if it's something that I've been really interested in, it's almost like I don't want to complete it.
Like, what's next? What else can I do? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you feel like you're going to be sad that it's done?
Yeah, like almost, especially if it's something that I'm really interested in or something, almost like, what do I do next? So I've had to embrace that, to recognize that, you can finish things, but then you can always find new ways to build upon that, you know.
I like that you said you like write down other stuff that you like have thought of doing while you're doing that. I love like writing down stuff and like checking it off and making checklists, and that feels really like good to complete things. And also like I feel like I would think of all these other things I wanted to do and then I just forget about them. So I mean, it's a great idea to write them down too, because then you can come back to it when you're like, I need a project. What am I going to do?
Yeah. For me, that cognitive load of my list of stuff that I have to do is sort of ever present, and being able to offload it to a list or a reminder to pop off tonight about something I wanted to do it legitimately makes me feel lighter.
So
It's like, that's handled for now.
here's a question. Part of my motivating by the finish line concept is that I like to turn off completely so that there's nothing to do. And it's a bit black and white like that. It's like I'm working and I'm pushing myself, and then I'm not working and I'm not even thinking about it at all. And there's a lot of transition time between one thing and the other. Whereas I've noticed, at least I think, I'm going to ask you guys in a minute, with ADHD, there seems to be more of a quicker turnaround from, oh, I wasn't interested, but now I am really interested, or vice versa.
That's the impulsiveness.
So what's your experience with that? Like, do you still need like a lot of transition time, or how do you manage transitions?
If it's something like I'm excited about, I don't need any transition time. I can like jump right into the next thing, and I'm like excited to get going and excited to get started on it. But if it's something that I don't want to do, yeah, transitions are really hard.
I'm curious do you ever have tasks that you know that you need to do that you don't want to do, but you've spent time thinking about how you would go about doing them? Because I find that affects my transition time a lot is, do I even know where to start? Have I broken it down into steps that I know I can execute? That sort of thing.
I can definitely relate to that. Sometimes I feel frozen approaching something just because I know that, okay, just to start this, I have to have the plan in place, and there's so many different things to consider, and it feels overwhelming to take that first step, because really the first visible step is going to be after a lot of thought processing and planning, and just kind of trying to figure out what the best approach is, and that seems daunting. So that kind of prevents me from wanting to switch tasks.
I use body doubling a lot. I think that works really great. It's basically you have a friend who you have them come over and they work on their project and you work on your project, and then you feel like, well, I have to be doing something because they're doing something, so I need to look busy over here. I actually had a friend call me the other day just on the phone, and she was like, can you body double me so I can clean my kid's room? And I was like, yeah, sure. And so we've even done it over the phone before. And I think that's a really great way to just get stuff done.
Oh, that's a cool idea. Yeah. I think I've incidentally done stuff like that, but I didn't know that term.
I think it's why so many people, you see so many people in coffee shops with their laptops. I think they're essentially body doubling.
I don't know about the rest of you, but I engage in what I call a lot of sideways procrastinating, especially when I'm transitioning to a different task. And if it's something that I'm dreading, it will suddenly give me the motivation to do all of these other things that maybe I might have potentially been dreading, and I'll start accomplishing those. And so sometimes, like, if there's something with work, or if there's some administrative thing that feels very overwhelming, now all of a sudden my house is clean.
I identify with that.
And that can help a lot too, because usually while I'm doing those like sideways procrastinating things, at least I'm getting some things done. But in my head, I'm processing and I'm thinking about the thing that I'm really like needing to do. And I'm starting to get more, I don't know, like acquainted with sort of breaking it down into steps, figuring out how to do it. And then when it comes time to actually do it, I find that it's a lot easier then.
Yeah, that's, there's a term that we've used a couple times at work, just describing shovel-ready tasks as stuff that you know how to do and we just need someone to do it. And having some of those on reserve is really nice when you feel like you need to think harder about the next thing that you haven't really considered yet.
What do you think about this word procrastination?
I think Dr. Devin Price's essay about laziness is a must-read for everybody.
I haven't read it, but is the idea that there is no such thing as lazy?
Essentially, that it's shorthand for blockers that are getting in the way of you doing the stuff that you need to do. And laziness is sort of a easy way to think about it, like, oh, the person's just at fault for not being better, instead of this person is encountering real barriers that are making it difficult to be productive to the level they want. And, it's very well articulated, and I'm not going to do it justice here, but I do highly recommend reading through that because it has single-handedly changed my opinion on the topic.
Looks like we have some Devon Price fans. Yeah, because it's mixed feelings about it. A lot of adults have pretty negative associations with the word lazy, or with concepts like procrastinating, for exactly that reason, Mark, that people have used it against them a lot in really emotionally hurtful ways. So,
I mean, I think that for being autistic, lazy is really just a way of recovering, where you need that time to be on your own in a quiet space just to kind of recover. So it's not, I don't know, like you're not doing anything wrong. You're re-regulating. I think that's really important.
Yep.
I find that I need a lot of time on my own to regulate. And the ADHD often is like, let's go have fun. Let's go do something fun. Let's go party. Let's go out. Let's call people. And I have for years, I always let the ADHD win. And I always would, go out and have a good time. And I wasn't listening to the autism, and it led to burnout a lot and often. And in the past few years, I've learned to start listening to the autistic side that was like, maybe don't go out, maybe spend some time on your own, and regulate. And I think as an ADHDer, it's really difficult to listen to the autistic side. And it's really easy to listen to the ADHD side because the ADHD side is fun and exciting. And doesn't want that. And the autistic side is like, let's just maybe do something calm and quiet. So I think listening to the autistic side that needs to regulate is really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a slightly different perspective to add to the procrastination piece, because it's possible we just don't have enough words and we keep using the same word to describe different things. But there's something that I experience quite a bit where there's a small task and I'm spending a lot of time not actually thinking about it in a positive way, just having anxiety about it without actually doing it. And in that version of procrastination, the best way to stop being anxious about the thing is to just do the thing. And so the challenge, though, is there's a laundry list of things that I could be doing. And if there's always one more, then the anxiety never goes away. So I have to pick the most important ones and then scratch off 80% of the rest of them and say, look, I'm not going to get to them. They're just not going to get done. Bad luck. And that's, I think, similar to what you were saying, Anne, about the regulating and recognizing your own limits and things. Like sometimes I just need to not try to do more. And for me, often the best way to not try to do more is to push myself to tick the one or two important things that I do need to do. And then that's the finish line for me. And then I don't do anything else. So yeah, for me, if I identify the procrastination, sometimes like it's like a tiny little hurdle that makes everything feel better after I've done the thing. It's hard to explain though.
That makes sense. I think also like acknowledging that you just can't do everything, and you have to take some things off your plate. And figuring out where those things are, that you can not do.
And off your plate permanently as well, not just I'll do these tomorrow, but I'm not, they're going to not get done at all.
Yep.
It's a vital skill figuring out how to manage the energy that you have for tasks. And I wish that there were an easier answer than figuring out what works for you and what doesn't. But that really is like, I've developed my methodologies over a couple of decades of trial and error of how do I get myself to do what needs done? How much energy do I need to reserve for myself? Like, what is my cone of uncertainty about how well I can handle the ambiguities in this task, given my energy level today?
That's a hard question. That's a big question.
I think it's really important to just kind of sit with it and think like, what is actually important to me? What do I really want to do? What do I really want to get done? And not what does everybody else want me to do? What do I need to do to look cool, or to like, what do I think society wants me to do? What do I actually want to do? I think that's a really important question that everybody needs to ask themselves. So I think we're doing a lot for everybody else and to like look a certain way, but I think addressing like what actually feels good to me and what feels important to me are some really good questions to ask yourself.
I'm wondering, do you guys also struggle then sometimes with like planning ahead or planning stuff in the future? Because I find energy management so difficult because on a day-to-day basis, it changes. And so I'll try to make plans, especially things that in the moment sound like they're not going to be that overwhelming or it's not going to be that much energy. But then the day of, I'll find, oh, wow, like this actually far exceeds like the energy meter, or trying to kind of find that balance then, especially when planning for the future.
I get really excited to like plan vacations, and then I love planning vacations. And so sometimes it'll be like, let's do it this weekend. Let's just go now. I feel like I have the energy. Let's do it right away. And if I plan something in the future, I will intentionally like try to take the week off before and limit how much stuff I'm doing the week before, so I have energy for the vacation. So yeah, pre-planning in that way.
That's a really good idea.
Or do you ever get an idea like for a holiday and then you're like, I'm not going to book it. I've planned everything, but I'm going to wait for like 3 days out. And then if I still really feel like it, then I'll book it.
I think that's not a bad idea. I've booked a couple of things kind of on a whim that I've realized a few days later, like, am I really, is this really the right time for that? So yeah, I think that's a good approach.
I would be too worried that it would like sell out and I wouldn't be able to go.
I usually end up paying the surcharge to be able to get things refundable precisely for that reason, even if it means tacking on a lot, just so that way I can cancel or back out last minute when I find out that, oh no, it's either not going to happen or this is just going to be so horrible to try to get through. It's not going to be fun for anybody.
Well, that is the big challenge with efficiency versus spontaneity. Like, things are a lot more efficient if you can plan them in advance, like, and invest in advance rather than just waiting to the last minute. But that requires accurately predicting what you're going to actually want. Like going shopping once a week instead of 3 times a day every time you're hungry. Okay, so again, if there are questions in the chat, feel free to ask them live. We also have the super chat feature, I think, available. I'll just do a really quick plug for an unmasking workshop that I've got coming up in a couple of days. It's on Monday, Australia time, which I think is Sunday afternoon for the US. So if anyone is interested in 3 steps to connecting with your authentic self, that's something that is available this week. A question I had that I was hoping will come up, it almost came up a bit earlier with what you were saying, Anne. Some people describe ADHD and autism being like 2 sort of distinct parts of themselves. What's your experience of that? Like, do they get along? Do they fight? Do they?
Mine fight a lot. They are. It's like I'm at constant disagreement with myself, and I have to sometimes let one win, and then let the other one win, and let them have them take turns. Yeah, I think that sometimes they help each other. I know that a typical thing for ADHD is being like disorganized and messy, but my autism really likes being organized. I like lining things up. When I was first figuring out that I was autistic, I was like, I don't line things up. I don't do that. And then I opened my pantry and I realized that I had like line of ketchup, line of mustard, line of like, and it was just lines. Everything was lined up. It looks like a grocery store. And so, yeah, so I think that the autism helps to organize things because I don't know, I like that organization.
And how would you classify the difference, like in your own mind, especially those who have both?
For me, it's like the ADHD really likes to have fun and really likes to have a good time and likes that hit of dopamine. And the autism likes consistency and doesn't like change, likes calm environments, likes predictable music, likes predictable things. The ADHD likes unpredictable things. So in that way, they can like they can aggravate each other. I think mostly the ADHD aggravates the autism, to be honest. Like I had an example was I had some friends over with their kids and our kids, and they were all playing and everybody was having a great time. And it was a really long day. And at the end of the day, they were like, let's go out for dinner. And the ADHD was like, yeah, let's go to this new restaurant. That sounds great. And then we got there and it smelled weird and it was loud and I'd never been there before and I didn't know what to order. And I actually had to leave and I went outside and I had a meltdown in the car, which was horrible and it felt awful. And I mean, it's a perfect example of like not listening. I wasn't listening to the autistic side that had enough that day. I was letting the ADHD win.
Thanks, Anne. And Aragon 2262 says that's exactly how they feel as well. So thanks for that.
Yeah, I think
there was also a question in the chat. Who is ADHD and who does not have ADHD? And so just very quickly, I definitely do not have ADHD. And Mark was saying that they were originally diagnosed and then now you're thinking that probably might not have been correct.
Probably just the autism in retrospect. But it's fascinating comparing and contrasting here.
Sandon, were you going to say something?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. So it sounds like there's some speculation that ADHD could actually be a trauma response, as opposed to something that is more naturally occurring. I think Dr. Gabor Mate is a proponent of that theory. And so I just wanted to bring that up as something to see if that resonates with other people, because to me, the ADHD and the autism fighting with each other, for me, ADHD seems to it's almost like your mind is scanning for threats and danger, and it's causing you to constantly kind of jump to some other thought, maybe because you became used to and really scanning for danger as a trauma response. And so, but the autism side is kind of wanting calm, wanting systems, approaches to things. I don't know. Is that something that resonates with you guys?
That's actually not something I've heard before. In most people who describe their own ADHD don't use those types of things. So yeah, others. What I think you were going to respond to that, Anne.
I think I read something a while ago that talked about, maybe it's ADHD 2.0 book, that talked about how there's like two different forms of ADHD. There's the type you're born with, and then the type you can get later in life. But I don't remember.
Yeah, I'd probably prefer to steer away from trying to guess causes. I feel like it's more helpful to just work with where we're at, of how it feels in the moment. But thanks for that, Sandon. You're basically saying that it feels like you're scanning for threats, and that's kind of why you're jumping between things. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a big, almost a meme at this point in the neurodiversity space, that it's so hard to extricate trauma from neurodivergence, because the two so often go hand in hand. Like, you're often inflicted with a whole lot of nonsense because people read you as weird. And so, I'm far from making any definitive statements on what's what, but I do think it's interesting, a good reason to refocus the question onto what are your experiences and what works for you. Like, at the end of the day, I find the autism ADHD labels interesting and insightful, but I think their primary use is finding strategies to get you living the life that you want.
I think
Nothing more, nothing less.
I think we're still really early on, kind of in understanding how they're different and how they're separate, and what all of this neurodiversity actually means and looks like. So I find it useful for knowing how to like look up tips if I'm struggling with something. I find having the label useful to see what other people are doing. But I think it's almost impossible to really tease apart all the different ones.
I'm interested if others want to respond to that question about if it feels like they're separate for you or not, or what that's like.
I kind of feel like mine, sort of like what Anne was saying, that they're sometimes competing with each other. So my autism really wants consistency. It really wants predictability. It really wants routine and stability. And then ADHD just wants variety. It wants new things. It wants whatever seems interesting at the moment. And so you can look around my house, and it's this kind of eclectic mix of super well organized and doom piles. And so it does feel like in some ways they are in competition with each other, and they don't always have the same motivations there.
So this is another thing that's a bit challenging to understand about ADHD, is the extremes of the organized and the doom piles. So when you see those organized piles, does that give you a dopamine hit? Like, everything is organized, this is fantastic, or is it something different?
I don't know. I think I really like when things are organized. I think maybe it's really satisfying to look at. I'd have said before, like, I think that visually stimming is also a thing where you can, if you look at something and it's organized or attractive to your eye, it is like how stimming is emotionally regulating. I think that it can get that from visual stuff as well.
Oh, that's kind of interesting. I am very much a messy person. Like I did a lot of cleaning up to make sure this wasn't too horrible, but you can see the recycled pile of textiles I haven't turned in for a few months. Uh, I never thought about it that way, but visual stimming, yeah, I that's a decent explanation for why I feel like I should be more organized, but if I already know where everything is and have my mental map laid out so I can see everything all at once and immediately hone in on the stuff that I need. That's, you know, I mentioned I don't think I have ADHD, but these questions are always in my head, like, what is the explanation for this, if not that? And it's mostly academic, but I find it intriguing. That visual stimming concept is something I hadn't thought about. Huh, thanks.
I think that alternatively, if things are messy, it actually stresses me out. I get stressed by that, and then I get more dysregulated.
That is something I've heard a lot with ADHD, is both the really organized, because organized looks great and it feels good, and similarly mess is stress. And whereas more like what Mark was saying, a lot of others in the autistic community, they're like, look, everything's messy, but I know where it is, so I'm happy. It doesn't need to look good. It doesn't need to be organized by someone else's standards. So that's interesting. Were you going to respond to that too, Maki?
I was just going to say, I really like when things are organized. And when Anne was mentioning visual stimming, I had this image in my head of, people have bookshelves where everything is color coded, and just how gratifying it is to see. But I know that also I tend to get very overwhelmed, not just when like things are messy, but when it's just a bunch of disparate different objects. And I have kids, so that is happening constantly, in my home, where there's just collections of different things. And I find that at least if I can get them into kind of like with like, then that helps a lot, because I can get very overstimulated just trying to process lots of different types of things in one area.
Yeah, that out of sight, out of mind thing, and doom pile, great term, was very much my thing as well. Like, my memory's not great. I think that's true for probably all of us relative to some baseline, but a lot of my reminding myself to do things is putting something out of place. Like, it registers as out of place, even though the pile looks unorganized to anyone else.
Yeah, if there's something I need to do, I'll put it somewhere where it sticks out, and then and I have to walk past it a bunch of times and see it before I finally God, I'll just do it.
Yep. That's why that painting is kind of at the top of my pile under the desk, because I need to remember to mount that and put it on the back wall later.
There's a bit of a time limit though on those things, because if you leave them there long enough, then they become normal. And then suddenly the sticky note, the to-do note on the wall, well, it's been there for 6 months and it's just part of the wall now. We also have a question from Unmistakable Jen. How do you deal with anxiety from job interviews? Is that something you even experience?
Yeah, and my boring practical answer for myself is that I do as much research as I can on the company. I don't have scripts precisely, but I do keep notes about, why is this position something I want to do? Why is this company someone I want to work for? And try to focus on those things. Like, it helps a lot with feeling like I'm doing something about the anxiety and legitimately helping me refocus more on the task at hand. But I'm curious what the ADHD contingency says.
I find for anxiety in general, I will actively stim, and that helps me emotionally regulate. And I think that's something that a lot of people are still getting used to doing, especially if you're kind of early in your diagnosis. But I think like actively stimming really helps me emotionally regulate. It really helps my anxiety a lot. And that looks like I have a fidget. Um, I was chewing gum earlier. I have lots of fidgets. I'll also do lots of like hand kind of stims. And I think that getting over the stigma of looking weird is really important for your own emotional regulation. Um, and I think you can do it in private, if that helps you. But I think also a lot of these fidget toys are great for helping people feel less weird about it. But I think that stimming is huge. I'll even ask my kids, what did you do to stim today? Because they're both autistic ADHD, to try to remind them that it is something important that they should be doing because it is emotionally regulating and it is really important for them.
So I have kind of an interesting anecdote on this because I was in a job interview a few years ago and I got feedback right afterwards. And I was very, very anxious going into it. Of course, I'm masking, which I think almost everybody masks in a job interview anyway. But they had given me a glass of water for the interview. And during the feedback portion of it, one of the interviewers told me, "Did you realize that you were drinking invisible water?" Because at some point I had ran out and I was still drinking the water. So now my interview tip is I bring my own water bottle that is not transparent. So even when I run out of liquid, I can still be doing the motion and nobody knows.
Yeah. And something you said reminded me that maybe one of the most valuable things I've gotten from thinking of myself actively as autistic and what impacts that has on how I live and think. It's really nice to remind myself actively, have I eaten? Am I the right amount of hydrated? Should I go grab a walk or something so I feel a little bit less likely to be anxious and vibrating in my chair? There's a lot of stuff that you can take for granted that you got it handled, but I need constant reminders for food and burning off energy. Otherwise, it can sneak up on me, and that anxiety, it will tend to feed off of if you're feeling bad, even if you can't pinpoint what the badness is. So it's, again, kind of a meme online, have you had water? Have you had a snack? But it's legitimately helpful for stuff like this. It's always going to be some amount of anxious, but you can control at least some of how you're feeling about it. And that's worth doing.
Maybe that's a little bit sensory too. Like you don't realize you're thirsty maybe, but your body feels it, right? Or
Yeah.
you don't notice that you're hungry so much, but your body feels it. And so that's just adding to your sensory overload.
Yep. Yeah, my two states are stomach growling or too full. Nothing else in between really registers.
So a bit of a follow-up question. We've been talking about anxiety. What about the opposite? What helps you to feel peaceful, especially the ADHD folk? What is feeling peaceful like?
One of the things that's really helped me is the deep belly breathing. So if I'm starting to feel anxiety, and doing kind of a 10 count of 4 breaths in and holding it for 1 count and out for 4 and then holding it again. I know it's like a science-based thing, but that it just brings kind of a completely different feel to things. If I've been thinking a lot throughout the day and then suddenly I've done some deep breathing for a few minutes, it's just like a black and white feeling, night versus day feeling of, man, this is different. This is calm and nice. This is how life should feel all the time. So it's something I try to do whenever I can remember to.
I think engaging in one of my special interests really makes me feel peaceful, because it feels like I love gardening. So I'll go out and I'll do some gardening. And when I'm out there, I feel like I don't really have to think about anything. I'm engaged and I just kind of do stuff and I know what I'm doing, and I just enjoy it. Yeah, I think that makes me feel peaceful because I'm not worrying.
Yeah, it helps me, kind of calling back to that shovel-ready idea. It helps me a ton to have something where I have a very simple set of instructions to execute, and I can just go through the process of kinematically doing it. Hiking is an easy example. You know, I have a reminder every 2 hours to put on sunscreen, a reminder every hour, like water, snack, take a break if you're feeling tired, and otherwise just go out, come back, enjoy the sensations of nature, which, you know, can be tough, but if you have the right amount of rest, calories, Etsy, I've found that really nice for me, is being able to experience more than think.
Yeah, my shovel ready thing is go for a walk, just out the front door, just walk. Yeah, makes a huge difference. Except I feel like it takes a lot of time, for me at least, and I guess that's part of the self-awareness piece, to recognize how your stress and anxiety or whatever it is building up slowly, and how long it takes and what you can do to let it out. So another thing with that is to not let it get too much. So that involves things like having a fidget all the time instead of trying to sit still for an hour without doing anything. And then I don't even need to think about it. My hands just keep pushing it around. I don't need to have a reminder, oh, better fidget now. It just can just sort of let it go. And I guess that's part of learning to unmask, in a sense, and do what you need to do on a more regular basis.
Yeah, I get a ton of mileage out of listening to music and tapping my desk. A simple pleasure.
Sometimes what I find really peaceful is, well, special interests, but also just, it's hard to get both my body and my mind to rest simultaneously. So if my body needs rest, but my mind still needs to chew on something, you know, I do this to fall asleep often, but I'll go read a paper on pasteurization, something that is not really super interesting, but it just gives my mind just enough stimulation that it's able to kind of help it calm down and allow my body to rest.
I do a lot of listening to something, or like watching a show or listening to an audiobook while drawing or while doodling or while crocheting, something that I don't need to really think about, so that I can listen to the thing that's happening. I think that also really helps, because I can't just sit and watch a show. That's too difficult. I have to be doing something. So yeah, drawing or crocheting or cross stitching.
We're ostensibly talking about differences between autism and ADHD. One of the things I like to do is sit in a chair.
And do what?
Exactly.
You just sit?
And then 20 minutes later, I'm still there.
Wow. And you just like stare? Do you just think? What you too.
if I think, I'm not conscious of thinking. I mean, I probably think lots of things, but not anything specific. It's not like I'm going to sit and I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do on the weekend. I'm just sitting.
That's amazing.
So that's one I just remembered I love to share, because it's one of the things that ADHDers are like, you what? What do you mean sit? What else are you doing?
Wow.
Yeah, that sounds like it would be so difficult to do.
Mm-hmm. Even like, do you meditate? Like, can you meditate? I cannot meditate. People are like, do
I
guided
suck at
meditations.
meditation. Meditation is too draining for me. I mean, it depends on the type of meditation, to be fair. There's a million different types, but a lot of the more popular types are either very visual, imagine yourself, blah, blah, blah,
Mhm.
or they're essentially brain training. They're essentially, can you focus your attention on something and hold it there?
Mhm.
And I find that draining. Like,
Mhm.
I have been focusing my attention all day and I want something relaxing. So an exercise in focusing my attention at the end of the day when I'm really tired,
Yeah.
not helpful in that sense.
I'll often do like a mindless game on my phone that I don't have to think about, and I'll then do my own meditation and think about and process stuff while just doing a game. But yeah, I can't do any of the like guided meditations.
And I just love how impressed people are when I just sit and do nothing. Anyway.
I can sometimes do like the body scan meditations, you know, where it's directing your attention to specific parts of your body. But unless it's guided and kind of just the right circumstances, I actually find it very difficult to do. I find doing meditative activities, things like going for a hike or something like that, being in nature, it's a lot more easy for me to get into kind of that sort of present mindfulness state than it is to do some sort of like deliberate type of meditation.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to get my brain to turn off, in the sense that I'm always like feeling the weight of the stuff that I have to do. But my ideal is just like being in a hammock with a light breeze and a sunshade. The sun and I don't really get along. But like, you know, just enough sensory input to where it can focus on that rather than sit completely still with just my thoughts. Let's let it wash over you, that kind of feeling. That's really nice.
It definitely helps if there's a gentle amount of external stimulus, like watching the wind through the trees, or something like that, that can kind of naturally focus energy without a deliberate focus. I think that's probably, if I had to say the number one most calming thing, it would be being able to stop trying to focus my energy, because it's just naturally being focused on one thing.
Mark, you saying that you had like constantly thinking about all the things that you needed to do. It reminded me of a video I saw of Paul's a really long time ago where you talked about background stress. And you were like how it's like in your random access memory. Basically, you're keeping everything in the forefront and you're constantly like, I need to do these things. I need to do these things. And that was really impactful for me when I learned about that, because I was like, okay, I don't have to keep everything in my RAM. I can write stuff down and then let go of it. And I can set timers, and I can use a calendar, which I never wanted to do because I was capable of just remembering all the things. And I found those different ways of offloading stuff from my brain really helpful.
Yeah, that cognitive load goes down so much if you can find somewhere else to put it. I pretty much live and die by my calendar. My partner is diagnosed ADHD, and I actually got a skylight calendar to have as a task list, but it's been repurposed into a full-time calendar. So I'm kind of back where I was.
So speaking of energy, how are we going? We've been chatting for about an hour. I'm thinking it might be a good time to start wrapping up a little bit. So maybe we can have a final thought on what's something that you realized today. It might be something you already knew, but you're just thinking, that's important. I need to remember that. This is how autism and or ADHD works in my life.
I really liked the idea of the body doubling. Somebody in the comments had said they hadn't heard of that term, but they'd done it before. And I think similarly, I've done it a few times. And I think that's probably a really effective strategy for getting things done that we don't have the motivation to do. So that's something that I want to look into more.
Yeah, that came to mind immediately. I guess if I had to try and pick something else, it's just that this, the neurodiversity space is still like nascent. We're getting a lot of people kind of trying to come together and find terms for things. And it is always a delight to get to hear from somebody who has different experiences than I do. But, finding common terminology has been really nice. So thanks to y'all for walking us through a lot of that experience.
I found it really helpful just to kind of think about autism and ADHD separately, and how they might sometimes contrast or conflict with one another, or they might have different things that they need at any given moment in time, because there is so much overlap. And I don't think I always kind of break it down or recognize that, autism might need this, ADHD might need this, and so thinking about it in terms like that, I think is going to be helpful moving forward when I'm feeling sort of those conflicting kind of desires or trying to do energy management or things like that, is recognizing that they might not always be in sync with one another, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think realizing that the emotional part of it is so much more of the ADHD is really interesting, and that the autistic side is like more like kind of the rational side, and the ADHD is much more emotional. Is really interesting thing to think about, look into.
Yeah, I think my takeaway is that I like what Mark was saying before about everyone needs different things. And it sounds, at the same time, it sounds like a bit of a cop-out, but it's actually really helpful to say that everyone needs to find their own solution. Because when we have that in mind, then when I hear what works for someone else, it's a suggestion. It's something I can try. It's something I can learn about a new term. Oh, I've learned what a motivation bridge is. Oh, I've learned about some people have a finish line as a motivation. Some, etc. So, yeah. And then I think having more specific terms would be really helpful, because if we talk about really big things like ADHD as if it's one thing, or autism as if it's one thing, or procrastination as if it's one thing, when actually there could be half a dozen different experiences that we sort of lump together under that one umbrella. And yeah, so interesting. We could talk for a lot longer if we wanted to, but thanks so much for you all volunteering to participate today. Yeah, it's been really great having you all.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And for everyone watching and either live or with the comments and things like that, thanks so much for making it interactive with all your questions and comments. If you would like to join our Patreon community and support this channel financially, there's a link to that in the description. You can become a member for as little as $1 a week. And we also, excitingly, have an unmasking workshop coming up on Monday, or potentially Sunday afternoon or evening if you're in a different time zone to me. So that's really exciting. I've run it a couple of times before. 3 steps to connecting with your authentic self. And I've actually got a process of slowly unmasking and learning how to communicate your needs and advocate for yourself. So that's really exciting. Again, the link is in the description. So we might leave it there, and I'll see you all again next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.